Today's guest is opening up about the fascinating story of Marrell McCollough. He's the man seen kneeling over Dr. King at the scene of his assassination in this famous photograph. Well, today his daughter, Leta Seletzky, opens up about the truth about her father, giving us a peek at her new book, The Kneeling Man. This is Advocate Now. Leta, you have such a fascinating life story, so fascinating that you wrote a book about it. It's called The Kneeling Man, and it tells the story of your father, who was a Black undercover officer who witnessed the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. You set out on a quest for the truth about your dad. What did you find out?
I found out that my dad's story is about so much more than just this undercover Black officer who infiltrated a Black militant group in Memphis in the 1960s. What I learned was that his story and the arc of that story really speaks to the arc of Black history in America in the 20th century and beyond, and the ways in which people, not only Black people, but marginalized people in this nation have had to navigate and work within systems, oppressive systems, and also outside of those systems in order to get free.
Well, your father, Marrell McCollough, appears in the famous photograph that was taken at the scene of Dr. King's assassination. That photo is in the collection at the Smithsonian. It's on the cover of your book. In the photo, your father is seen kneeling over Dr. King, thus the title. What was your perception of that photo as a child? Did you feel that it was something maybe you shouldn't ask questions about?
For as long as I can remember, I've known about the photo and that my father was in it and that he was a Memphis police officer. But that's all I knew for many years, and no one spoke about it. Also, my parents divorced when I was 3 years old. And so I think that some of my discomfort around the photo was bound up in the discomfort around this divorce and the acrimony that came along with it.
And your dad went on to become a CIA agent. He was able to tell you who he worked for, but he couldn't discuss what his mission was. What was that like for you growing up, being surrounded by so much mystery, and then later deciding to piece together this story over a number of years?
I think, like so many people who grow up with silences and secrets, it just became a part of how we operated as a family. And so to have this additional level of secrecy with my father's work as a CIA officer just kind of came with the territory. I mean, we were already so used to not talking about him and not talking about his work that that just became another layer of it. Looking back, I can see that this way of navigating did become very formative for me. And I think it did shape the way that I have interacted with people and, how I have behaved with a certain level of reserve that I think was highly influenced by these dynamics.
And I can imagine that there would be some risk involved with digging up the truth, which I think makes this a very brave book. Were there any challenges that you faced in researching your father's life and story?
There were a lot of challenges. I would say the biggest one was just breaking that silence.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like, when you break a silence like that, it's like breaking a glass. And so there's no real clean and elegant way necessarily to do that. But that was the hardest part. And just the challenges of being prepared to feel these huge emotions that come along with the murder of Dr. King, that come along with what led to my father being present on that scene, why he was there, what his path was, I guess, systemic pressures that placed him on that path and moved him along it. And then also there was a lot of fear. I didn't know what I was going to learn, and I didn't know how people would react once the story was made public.
What was your father's role in that moment?
He had just arrived at the Lorraine with a couple of Dr. King's cohorts and also a couple of women who were college students, and they had been on a shopping trip all day. One of Dr. King's colleagues, James Orange, who they called Baby Jesus, was looking for a pair of 4-button overalls to wear to an upcoming march that Dr. King was to lead. And so my dad, in his role as an undercover police officer playing the role of an invader. And in fact, he had been named their Minister of Transportation because he had a car and, almost no one else had one. So he, in his role as Minister of Transportation, had been driving Baby Jesus and had been on the shopping trip with these college students all day long, and they just happened to reconvene at a place called Claiborne Temple, which was one of the nerve centers of the sanitation strike supporters. The sanitation strike in Memphis is sort of the historical background of all this. And then they went over to the Lorraine because it was close to dinner time, and that is where Dr. King and members of his Southern Christian Leadership Conference were staying, and also there were members of the invaders who were staying there. The SCLC had provided them a room. So that is why Dad was there in the parking lot. And when he arrived, he saw Dr. King standing out on the balcony of his hotel room. And moments later, there was a thunderous boom, and Dr. King fell, and my father, with his police training and his army training, immediately knew that Dr. King had been shot. And unlike most people whose instinct would be to run away from an active shooter situation, my dad is one of those folks that runs into danger when he thinks he can help. And so he ran up an external staircase and dropped to a crawl and crawled over to Dr. King to attempt first aid.
You grew up in North Memphis. How would you say that your upbringing shaped your view of society at that time and being Black in America?
I have always been aware of race and oppression and anti-Blackness. And so my entire worldview was very much bound up with the struggle for Black freedom. And of course, growing up in Memphis, where the assassination of Dr. King happened, just put me at, kind of the locus of this hinging event in American history that was an example of racist violence. And gun violence. And so I would say that it was highly formative. And I think that this has provided the lens through which I view my dad's story and my own story and the way that I view America today.
And I mean, how much work would you say that we still need to do as a society in terms of racial justice, even though we have made progress, but where do you see us going?
There is right now a struggle for the soul of America. There's a struggle for democracy that is at a level of intensity that I'm not sure we have seen in this country since the Civil War. And so I think it is so important now, that we just keep moving forward. We can never become complacent. Because just because we are moving forward in time does not mean we are making progress. And if we don't continue the fight to make sure that all people are able to achieve life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness as promised in our founding documents, then we can easily find ourselves in a place where we are going backwards. And there is a precedent for America going backwards.
Well, Leta, thank you so much for sharing your story, your father's story, sharing your truth with us. Everyone, make sure you check out Leta's book, The Kneeling Man. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
I'm Sonia Baghdadi. Thanks for watching and advocating. For more stories and content like this, visit advocate.com and advocatechannel.com.